Hello, hello, hello. We are back again with the Got Value podcast. And I told y'all every week it gets better and better and better. I truly do love, I don't even remember how Angelina, you and I met. Have no clue. I do not remember. But I know from the moment that I met you, I just loved how you moved through a room with such a powerful magnetism that was also centered in grace. And I get excited when I see women who I know are powerful, they know they're powerful, but there's a level of grace that is just so fascinating to me. So when I started the podcast, I was like, she don't know it yet, but I am definitely going to have her on the podcast. I just got to get her to say a yes. And so I am so grateful that you said yes to joining me today. So thank you, first of all.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the conversation, and I love everything that you've been sharing recently and have to say. So I'm excited to dive in.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a firm believer in the journey that I've been on. It's been such an interesting one, but it forced me to get to know who I am. I am a firm believer in knowing who you are and being confident in whomever that is, right? That it informs your choices. And so I always like to start every interview asking each person who comes on is like, who do you say you are?
Oh, I love that question. And I love that because I think who you are evolves so much throughout your life. And the first thing I would say, and I'll answer the question too, but I also think it's important that we are open to evolving how we see ourselves and who we are, and just recognizing that your perception of yourself, your desire to be who you want to be is going to shift. And I've seen a lot of shifts in myself in the last couple years, even. So I would say where I am now, one thing that's a big critical part of my identity is a business owner. That's huge. I've really learned a lot about myself through leading and growing a business and through advocating for other business owners as well, working with a lot through the work that we do at our company. That's a huge part of it. Politically, living in this country, I think you can't get away, nor would I want to. But my identity as a woman, as a Black woman, is critically important to me as well. So those are probably two of the most powerful aspects of my identity in this moment right now.
Yes. I love the fact that you said who you are evolves. Because what happens is too many of us, we won't even give ourselves permission to change. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, this is what it is, or you don't feel, like you can change, or well, this is who I've been, so this is just what it is. I remember when I was growing up, and I love my aunt. She has such a big heart. But she told me something. I think I was 8 years old, and I rejected the idea then. I was respectful because back then you could knock kids in their mouth, so I wasn't gonna try her gangster. But she told me, she was like, "Well, you were born poor, you gonna live poor, and you gonna die poor."
Yeah.
And in my little 8-year-old brain, I was like, "Oh, I don't think that's gonna work for me."
Yeah.
I was like, "This is not it. Can we be different?" And so giving yourself permission to evolve and to change is something that, at least for me, has been a new revelation that, hey, you can change. Like, it is possible. And then you can define and redefine too what it looks like for you, what joy looks like for you, what love looks like for you, what happiness looks like for you. Like, you get to define it. And so for me, I always ask people, like, what do you define as like personal success and professional success? I personally believe one feeds the other, but there are some who believe they should be totally separate. It's like, I want to know from you, like, what do you define as that success for personal and professional?
Yeah. So I'll start with professional, but I will agree with you that they do bleed into each other. As I've grown my business and continue to focus on growing it, I will say how I show up for my people means a lot to me. Being a fair leader, being a leader that is helping to develop and be there for the people I work with means a lot to me.
Mhm.
Personally, I really feel success for me is about acceptance, because there are things that, I started with a vision board. I had a bulletin board that I ordered off of Amazon back in the day. And for years, I had the same things written up on it, aspirations I had, wanting to be a professor, wanting to be in Forbes or in different magazines. And a lot of those things, in some way or another, I have been able to accomplish. And then there are some pieces that I haven't. And for me, when I think about personal success, it's just really about accepting where I am and where I've come. We did an assessment at an offsite for my company recently, and we had to, one of the questions that it asked us in the self-assessment was, am I only focused on results, or will I allow myself to enjoy the journey? And my real answer is, a lot of times, I'm about the results. I mean, I'm a business person, right? I want to see the wins. I want to see the wins.
What these numbers looking like?
Right. But as I have been reflecting on it, I've really been saying to myself that I want to enjoy the journey more, because you'll never have, every day I wake up, and this is really important for me. When I wake up and I get, like, I'm still laying in bed before I, even quiet the alarm, sometimes the first thing I say is just like, thank you for this day. Like, before the day has even started, because this isn't a day we'll have again. And I'm really realizing that more and more the older I get, that I have to take advantage fully of all the days that I have. So personal success for me looks like accepting where I am and not letting my mind wander or spiral down a rabbit hole of all the other things that I haven't done. I'm still going to be working towards them, but this is where I am right now. And for this moment, I'm going to enjoy where I am right now. So that's personal success. Professionally, there's a lot more I want to do.
Yes, amen. Okay.
The list is quite long, and I'm very ambitious, and I'm comfortable with that. But I think that even recently, I've been a part of a lot of conversations around what makes a good leader, what makes a good manager. And I think we're so driven in our society about producing results. And sometimes caring for the people that help you produce those results get lost. And as we are growing, I realized that I have to put on the hat of not just a producer, but also of being someone that does develop. So I say that to say, within all my ambition, I want to make sure that I'm always people focused.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to both parts of what you said, the destination will feel how the journey felt.
Yeah.
So if on the journey you were, kind of miserable, or kind of only focused on the end point, or it was always, okay, yeah, I got this, but now I need to get this. Once you get to the destination, it's going to be like, what?
Yeah,
What?
absolutely.
What do you mean? Jim Carrey, and I really, really like Jim Carrey. Yes, he's a comedian, but also super, super smart. He was saying how he wants everybody to get their wildest dreams and imaginations, so that you can see that it's not really all that you thought it would be. Not that it's a bad thing, but if you only focus on the outcome, and I am much like you, I am results focused. What these numbers looking like, who are these collaborations with, where were we featured, what are the analytics looking like? I operate on both sides of my brain very, very well. But what I too had to learn is if I don't put myself, I like to call it a caregiver position, where if I don't put myself in a caregiver position, the very people who are going to help me to get there will also assist me in ensuring that I don't stay there. Because they mad as ever. They feeling slighted. They don't feel as though I care. And so whenever you are working with and dealing with people who feel as though you don't care about them, the person, A, you won't get the best out of them. And B, they may assist you in harm coming to your business, or honestly, even to you.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. And really, when we think about what does it mean to be a good leader, part of that is, like, I love what you said. First of all, it made me blush. You called me magnetic. I love that. But I think part of that is really about just making sure you, like, what, to your point, you won't be able to stay in or keep that position. You won't be able to maintain and sustain any results you are driving if the people around you are frustrated, or they're feeling unheard, or they're feeling not that you're not paying attention to what motivates them. So you might be able to hit one or two results, but I think for long-term success, right, and long-term sustainability, you really do have to care about the people who are around you. So we all have our moments, and no one's perfect, where, you know, maybe you don't have for that day the time to give the feedback the way you want it to, but it is important that that is the exception and not the rule. And the rule really is about, how do I create a sense of community with the people I'm working with?
Absolutely. Because, and I look at Maya Angelou just because her story is wild. Like, sis, I know we honor her, and I do honor her, but sis' story was wild. Where she started from to where she and who she became, it is a truly powerful testament. And honestly, I feel the same way about Jay-Z. Now, of course, not on the same level, but I feel the same way about him, in that, okay, from corner boy to whole billionaire, showing folks how to tap into, build their own, like, create pathways for other people. He went from, girls, 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 girls to the family legacy. Like, he put away stuff for Blue. Like, you were talking about it earlier too, when it comes to like that evolution. And for me, one of my favorite poems, because I'm such a nerd, like, I nerd out on the
Don't make me go get my Nikki Giovanni book on you, okay? Start reading you poetry.
I nerd out, and I love some poetry. I used to make my dates take me on first dates, take me to like poetry nights. I'm such a nerd. But in with what Maya Angelou was saying is people will forget what you said and what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So much so, to this point, she's been gone for a number of years. And because she made people feel a certain way, she's still experiencing history, life-altering experiences. And she's been gone for so long, with her now being the first, Black woman on a quarter. Like, when you make people feel a certain way, it transcends space, right? Like, it transcends time and space. And so when we were talking about like the power to transform and everything else, one of my favorite poems is the end of it, or a stanza in it, is, I'm the master of my fate and the captain of my soul. Like, what does that? It's called Invictus. And the last stanza in it, after it talks about all the things, is, I'm the master of my fate and the captain of my soul. And so too many people relinquish their power, thinking as though they have none. Like, so how do you suggest, as leaders, that we truly discover like our greatest desires? Like, what is that part of self-discovery? What does it look like?
Yeah. So, well, first I want to talk about that evolution, because I love that you brought up the example of Maya Angelou and Jay-Z. And when we started and you asked me, how do you define yourself? I said, I'm looking at what matters to me most in this moment. And so there's two things. One, we can always look at how we define ourselves for ourselves, but the reality is some people are always going to define us by how they want to define us. And for Jay-Z, and that is why it's critically important to have your own understanding of yourself. So for Jay-Z, I'm sure that there are some people, despite his billionaire status, despite his contributions in different ways to society, that still may only want to see him as a criminal, or may only want to see him as the corner boy, or however you frame it. And so that is why that self-work, because it's not to say that that wasn't a part of his life. We all have things that are part of our lives that maybe we did what we had to do to survive the situation we were in. Maybe we weren't the most proud of how we were in that situation. We've evolved, we've grown. And there are going to be some people that always want to keep you really jailed, trapped by that spot, right? And how you grow as a person and how you continue to evolve is by you just releasing any sort of guilt, shame that you have about that part of your life. And it's a part of your story, no doubt. And he raps about it. He talks about it. No doubt that those things make him who he was. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the full picture of who he is, right? So I think for ourselves, we have to understand that any moment in our lives isn't necessarily the full story of who we are. And that's why it is important to keep working on self-acceptance and looking at, for this moment, who do I need to be to show up in this season in my life, right? So that's the first thing. Your question again, because I want to make sure I answer it. But you said a lot when you talked about Jay and Maya Angelou that really that made that thought come alive for me.
Yeah, no. So that the part of it is like, how do we, because we feel like we can't change. Like, this is what it is. I don't have the power to change it, even though you may have done so in another arena. There's something about changing and adjusting ourselves or discovering like who we are. How do we get to the point to where we tap into the essence of our own true selves and then feel as though we have the power to go after like our greatest desires? Like, how do we even start?
Oh my goodness. Well, you're talking to the owner of a coaching business. So of course I'm going to say it begins with a coach, but I really do mean that. And I don't say that lightly. I will say, you know, I don't sell really to individuals. So when I say it, I really do believe in it. The bulk of our revenue comes from business to business partnerships, right? So I'm not trying to convince anyone, even though we do have a customer product that we just launched last year, we're still encouraging people to get their employers to pay for it for them, right? But I say that to say, I believe in the power of coaching so much, and therapy, separate from coaching. I'll talk about both. But what I really, why I really think that it's the first step in really understanding yourself is because you have a partner, an accountability partner with you who is trained and really focused on making sure they're helping you drive the awarenesses you need to better discover yourself. And sometimes that is working with you on assessments. I've done so many self-assessments in my life. And it's not just about filling out the quizzes or, you know, circling the bubbles. But to the point I raised earlier, the assessment I took a couple weeks ago, it's still sitting with me. I'm still looking at how does this new understanding of myself, am I okay with it? Do I want to make some shifts? Does this change how I show up? Does this change how I even explain to other people how I need them to show up with me and for me? So it's not just about taking the assessments. It's also what sort of reflection are you going to allow in your life to help you better understand what you should do as a result of that new information. That's one part. It's also feedback. You know, frankly, we all have blind spots. There's one framework that I love looking at. It's the Johari window, which is basically a quadrant that shows us there are 4 different arenas in which we walk in, right? So there's the arena that's open. It's the part we know about ourselves. And it's the part that everyone else knows about us because that's what we're showing. We all have a facade, and I know facade has a negative connotation, but it may not be negative. It's the part that we know, but we're not showing to others. We're keeping it from other people. Then there's the blind spots. That's the part that other people see in us, but we're not perceptive enough. We're not emotionally enough to see that part. And then the last part is the unknown. We don't know it yet. We haven't discovered it in ourselves yet, and no one else has either. And so when I think about that, what comes to mind is the fact that all the work I do on myself, there's still going to be new discoveries. There's still going to be, there's some situation that hasn't happened in my life yet that's going to unleash a whole other part of me that I just have not had the experience to know that part of myself yet. So I think an understanding of that really helps set a foundation of how we can move in this process of self-discovery. So I would say it is about one, understanding what I'm, all that is out there, what I am sharing, understanding if I have a facade and I'm not sharing parts of myself with others, why might that be? Is it because I don't have the confidence yet to share it? Is it because I'm afraid of what other people might say? If I let people know, really, I'm this creative person that loves poetry and going to poetry, but will I be judged for it? Or what, I'm making this up, but whatever it might be, there's something that's preventing us. And then for those blind spots, that's where you do need other people. We need a community to help us discover more about ourselves, because the blind spots isn't necessarily a bad thing. A blind spot might be everyone else sees you're exceptional when you do this thing, and you haven't identified that for yourself yet. So you're spending all your energy over here, but really other people see this talent in you right here. So identifying a blind spot doesn't necessarily just mean, when I deliver feedback, people think I have an attitude. We always think a blind spot is this negative thing. It may not be. It may be. Everyone thinks I'm really talented here, and I didn't know that that's where I shine. So I have to know that information. And then the last part is just understanding and accepting that there are parts of ourselves we just will not know until an experience comes out. Like, for example, you being a mom, and I know you mentioned that to me earlier, might have unleashed new awarenesses in you about how you lead or how you show up. And that experience is completely different maybe than what it would have been like for you before that experience. So I say that to moving, anything, any big life event, the loss of a parent, COVID, being quarantined for 2 years for so many of us has likely unleashed new awarenesses about ourselves that prior to that experience, we just wouldn't have had.
I agree wholeheartedly. And it's accepting too, beyond the fact that you're going to evolve, you're going to change. And some changes you just won't like.
Yeah.
Some ways in which you like, you're not going to like it. And then too, acknowledging the fact that what was acceptable for you previously is now no longer acceptable.
Yes. It's okay to recognize that there are things you don't like about yourself. It's just not okay to get stuck there, right? So when you have those moments where you recognize this is something about myself that, and maybe it's not even as strong as I don't like, but I'm not comfortable with this, or I want to change this, own that, and say that's okay. We're allowed to have multiple feelings, right? But the main thing I would say is we should like ourselves. It's just a healthier life. It's going to be a better life for us if we do like ourselves. Yes. So when you find yourself in that moment, then say, okay, this is an area now that is going to require some work from me to improve how I feel about me.
Ooh, it's that last piece. It's going to require some work in me that will improve how I feel about me.
Yeah.
That willingness to do the work is something that I personally believe people don't put enough emphasis on. You can desire and want to change all day long, but if you don't actually take some step, even if it's like a centimeter forward, that was some movement. You did something. But just saying I want change and then going back to sit down and do all the other things, that have gotten you to this place, it's ineffective.
Yeah.
And then what happens is it starts to build a wall. I consider limitations as walls, right? It starts to build that wall higher and higher and higher of what you feel are your limitations, whether they're real or perceived. So since you are a coach and we have you on here, and since you primarily work, with corporations, we just gonna get just a little piece, just a little dab in here for our personal growth. What do you believe are like 3 ways or 3 tools, right, that we can use to push beyond what our perceived limitations are to help to lower that wall so we can keep running?
Yeah. So the first I would say is definitely visioning. I mentioned a vision board earlier, and it's the start of the year. I know a lot of people might be in that process. And for every person, what visioning looks like might be different. It may be cutting out things from a magazine and putting it on your wall. It may be having positive affirmations that are pasted around your house. It may be journaling and reflecting. But I do think visioning, however you do it and what feels most natural and comfortable to you, is important. when I used to do a lot of one-on-one coaching, one of the homework assignments for visioning I would give to my clients would be along the lines of really imagine yourself. So say there was a new job that they were trying to go out for, or something new that they were trying to tackle. Imagine the decision already made. Now walk in it for a week. So every day when you wake up and you say, I am planning, and so say it's a relocation, a job that requires you to move from New York to LA. I'm planning my move from New York to LA. What has to be done to support me in this move? Actually walk through the steps in your mind. And that's really critically important, because a lot of one of the things you said earlier is like these things that are our wildest dreams, the Jim Carrey quote you called out.
Yeah.
They feel, when you get there, you realize it's not as crazy as you thought. And so there's so much that can be, drawn from that quote. But in this moment, I'm going to use it for my purpose. And so when the things that are our wildest dreams, the expectations that we feel are the most unrealistic are only that because we haven't thought through the tactics to get there. And so once we take that goal that seems far out, or that decision that has to be made, a lot of people have problems making decisions and being decisive because we're like, well, what now has to happen? But if we can create the start with the process of visioning to really think through, how will this now change my life? We're already doing half the work. And then you can see through that visioning process, does this really fit me the way I thought it would? Or do I need to reset my vision? So that would be one thing I would say for sure is really critical in that process of starting to move forward.
Ooh, so I love music, right? Like growing up, I was super religious growing up. And so I wasn't allowed to listen to what my parents called as the devil's music.
Okay.
And so I went way left when I turned 18. I got piercings. Only thing I didn't do is get a tattoo, but I went way left. And so I started because I didn't know so much. I hadn't heard so many musical artists. Like I went ham, learning and figuring and all the things. And what brought to mind with what you said when it comes to visioning is the Kanye. It's a line in one of his raps. Old Kanye, not new Kanye. No disrespect to either person. Everyone is allowed to evolve however they deem necessary and fit. But he says, before I had it, I used to close my eyes and imagine. And when I'm going through really, really tough moments, I am brought back to that line to where I close my eyes and imagine and I didn't even just like what you were saying, I walk myself, like I get on in my mind a mental roller coaster and I allow that roller coaster to take me around what it looks like now. And then I get excited and feel, how and what I'm experiencing in my head. Because one of the things that you said is envisioning it, you're kind of halfway there because you can now see yourself with what at one point was unimaginable. You're now seeing yourself doing it. So it changes things.
It really, really does. I think that's very powerful. And the other, we talked about coaching and I called out therapy too. Something else that you said that really struck a chord with me, just made me think too about, so with when you are thinking about taking that next step, I also think it's critical to think about, have I healed from past traumas? Am I aware of what my saboteurs might be that are preventing me from moving forward? Because a coach can really help you with that process of crafting the vision, of sitting in it, of creating a plan, and even being accountable to you on that plan for moving forward. But if you haven't done some of the work to understand sometimes we're just moving through life, right? We're moving. If you're really trained to be resilient, earlier we were talking about compartmentalization. If you're trained to just keep moving, then sometimes you may not even have the awareness yet to understand why you do something the way you do. And so one of the things I like about therapy, so I recommend before diving into coaching for anyone, make sure you take some time to have some therapy sessions if you can, I really recommend this because it can help you understand why your behavior or why you've made the choices you've made up to this point, and getting that richer understanding, diving into your past with a therapist and seeking some healing about that also helps you as you prepare for how you move forward. And when we talk about releasing that shame, like what choices did I have to make in my past? Because that was, those were the cards I was dealt. That was the best I could do at that time. So one of the pieces about getting that healing for, the space that you're in is it helps you to really own who you are and where you want to go in that next chapter.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer. Is there are two types of people, and this is not my quote. This is Jay Barnett's quote. People who are in therapy and people who need to go to therapy. Going to therapy or needing therapy, neither one is a bad thing, but your talent can get you in places that your trauma will kick you out of.
Yeah.
Because there are things that you just have not resolved. And then when you're triggered, you respond in a way that messes up sometimes the trajectory of your life. No, you should not sit in that shame for forever. You just absolutely shouldn't. But there are some things that if you don't deal with them, they don't deal with you.
Yes. Absolutely. And even for many of us, as I think particularly about, I'm very close with my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. I have 2 living great-grandmothers. And being around one of my great-grandmothers who's 100 years old, she still is doing very well. I saw her at Christmas. She cooked me mac and cheese standing up. I was like, Grandma, go sit. But she won't. And she's always been very particular about that. She's like, I am living. If I am here, I'm going to live. I don't want to sit down.
Yes.
I want to move. But being around her, and the older I get, the more I will just sit. When I was younger, I didn't necessarily want to sit and hear the stories. Now it's the thing I look forward to the most. While she's cooking, asking her what was dating like in the 1930s, in the 1940s.
This ghetto now.
Ask her all the questions. But it also creates for me just this really deepened awareness that the choices and the privileges that I have now are really beyond her wildest dreams and her wildest, and she gets to see it in real time. She'll sit here and ask me about what it's like growing a business, what it's like working for big companies or having my name mentioned in the press. And this is something that my great grandmother, it wouldn't have been something she could even imagine for herself. So I take a lot of time to just express gratitude. So when I wake up and I'm saying thank you for this day, it's like I have choices. I have options that was not available to my family in this country because of the status of women, because of the status of Black women, because I'm a descendant of a slave, right? And we had very different life options. And just about every one of my close friends who has grandparents or great grandparents that are living, or even if they've passed on, we'll talk about how almost everyone in our family, they were live-in nannies, right? Or live-in housekeepers. And for me to be in the position I am is just such a great privilege, and I accept that. However, at the same time, one of the things that can happen is that questioning sometimes of, can I do this? Do I deserve to be here? Because I haven't necessarily seen it done or feel comfortable at all times. And that's where therapy was really a game changer for me, because it helped me to own that saboteur, these fears that I had were really just because I was still coping with the life that I have now being so different than the life, what you get from your upbringing being so different.
Absolutely. It's something that that is something that I've been dealing with my mother, in that it would make her uncomfortable to see us go after the things that we want. Like, it would make her super uncomfortable. And sometimes she'd get upset. Well, why you always got to do it that way? And I used to respond to with the same energy. Okay, I'm gonna give you what you're giving me. And then I finally realized through therapy, shout out to my therapist, is that just like you were saying, her experiences are so incredibly different. what she had to endure, how she had to do it. You weren't allowed to just say how you felt and what you wanted and what it needed to be in order for you to move forward. So for her, she's coming from a place of, if you do that, you're going to get in trouble. And I'm just like, well, no, actually, I own the business. So if I do this, I get to receive, this benefit. And for her, sometimes I have to constantly remind her, like, hey, no one's going to hurt you. Like, not in this space. Now, I can't say what folks will do outside of this arena, but in this space, you're not going to be hurt because you have an opinion or you want to do this or you want to do that. Like, that's okay. You get to have an opinion. Like, even when it comes to dating, she's like, well, why'd you say that to him? He gonna leave. And I'm like, and if he does, so be it. So be it. Like, wild.
This is so powerful. And it also just makes me think about, in my early 20s, what I heard working in corporate versus what I would tell anyone who is entering the workforce now. And so often coming into corporate environments, I felt that I was instructed by mentors. I was instructed by mentors and people who I know cared about me, but you read all the books and you have these philosophies that as a Black person, and especially as a woman, you have to work 10 times as hard, and putting all of these, or how I should show up, how I should alter my voice, alter my hair, alter my style to be accepted, and hopefully,
not even a guarantee,
and respected, but how much that created just this sense of, again, I have to really fight and earn these things that I really should be entitled to, in terms of how a corporation should treat me or how work should treat me and how everyone else is entitled to. Yeah. And I think about that and how really everyone was doing the best, and you give people compassion because everyone was doing the best with what they had, and that was how it was for a long time. But then to see the Ursula Burns of the world, rocking her natural hair and her fade and being the CEO of Xerox, or more people showing up as themselves, and how much it has shifted work culture to people understanding that we deserve more at work than the bare minimum has been so meaningful to me. So I think, again, I love what you said about having that compassion and understanding for your mother, or, for any of us, for elders in our lives who had to make choices to do really what we needed to do to survive and feed for our family, provide and feed our families, and how we're entering a space, thankfully, hopefully, some of us, there's still a lot of challenges in our country for people of color. But as more of us are entering a space where we are past survival mode, how do we create lives, people where we can thrive and not just survive? And people will sometimes ask me, that who I'm working with, what does equity in the workplace really look like, right? And I think one of the things I think about often is for young Black employees, men and women, young Black men and women, Latinx employees, all employees of color, to be able to make decisions based on passion, which is something that I felt like I didn't have the agency to do early in my career, because I was trying to make sure that I could pay off student debt. I didn't have passion. Taking the job based off what I'm most passionate about wasn't something that I had the privilege of at that age, based off of how, what I had financially on the table. And so part of that would be for us to be paid fairly for the work that we do, to enable more of us to make choices based on passion. It's just one aspect of what my vision is for the future.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, primarily because when you have to play a role, wear your hair a certain way, not dress in a color because it'll bring too much attention, what you are forcing folks to do is become method actors. And if you've ever listened to any of Denzel's, like some of his old interviews, Denzel Washington, he says when he is preparing for a role, he goes away for 2 weeks to complete, maybe it's not 2 weeks, I might be lying, but he goes away for a specified amount of time to fully become whomever that person is. And then he works really, really hard to maintain that character throughout the time frame when he's filming. And then he goes away again to completely like wash off and get rid of who that person is until he has to do it again. So if you think about it in the workplace, if you have people who are constantly putting on a mask to be able to be palatable to you in your workspace, you're not even getting the best of them because they're not necessarily focused on what you need them to produce or provide. They're focused on maintaining the character. And what happens is they eventually sabotage not only themselves, but also the work, not because they're meaning to, but because they're focused on maintaining and playing the role.
Snaps. If I'm in the poetry night with you, snaps, because that was it. That was it.
You lose them, and you've lost them from the moment you require them to be someone else.
Yeah.
The moment you require them to be something else, it's kind of like saying, "Well, I only trust you to get the work done if you're sitting in my face."
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
And you know, to that point, some of us have been in that situation ourselves. So that I just want to like bring it back to that theme of self-acceptance. We made choices, doing the best we could with what we had. And if you're, you know, if you need therapy to help unpack that and really get some acceptance there, I encourage that. If you are skilled at working through it on your own, I hope you find space for that too, because that is something we've made choices with the best that, you know, the best we had at that time. And I think owning that and then shifting and allowing yourself the freedom to move into the next chapter without that baggage is really powerful and is a much lighter way of living.
Yes. Yes, yes. And I want to, especially because I know you work with organizations, so I want to close it out with, what do you believe, or how should people go about, as professionals, you know, in the workplace, how can folks leverage like what their personal value is and the budgets of their learning and development departments? How can they leverage those opportunities to excel in their career? Because coaching, I believe, is needed.
Absolutely. And a lot of employers are paying for that more and more as a way to show up for their employees. The thinking has shifted so much from even when I started the business, where it was really, coaching was something that was really for two key audiences, call it a decade ago. And it was for folks who were problem employees, where they were great producers, but they were awful to be around. So it was to fix their behavior. That was one segment. The other segment was really critical, identified top talent, and it was seen as an investment. And that's really shifted because more folks understand how much leveraging coaching just improves performance. There's more data that's been collected about how you have better collaborators on teams. You're able to better communicate effectively your needs to your department, better negotiators. So there's all these skill sets that are developed when leveraging coaching. And now there's data to back that up too. So I think, one, more employers are paying for it. So don't be shy about asking for professional development and potentially coaching as a part of that professional development in your performance plan. And then the other piece that you said that resonated with me is, how do we think about our personal value and bring that in? And I look at all parts of who I am as an asset, right?
Yes.
So even when I did have to, or I was in corporate, and there were times where sometimes I felt I was making decisions to code switch or make myself, to your point, more palatable. I think there were those moments in my career, if I'm being really honest. What I do think about, though, is the fact that I have, in so many instances in my life, been one of the only, and found ways to be comfortable, found ways to communicate who I am to all these other people, and understand them, find ways to be conversations to understand them, and it's made me better with people. It's made me better, a better communicator. It's made me a more skilled person at being persuasive, right? So all these skills I've developed through these situations. And I think recognizing the full picture of who you are and how that actually is an asset is really important. We're also now in a time where people are understanding that not having diverse teams is leaving money on the table.
Yes.
So bringing that to something that should, require you to be recognized for that value financially as well. Even now, employee resource groups are starting to be compensated positions if you're in leadership roles, or they're providing other value at many companies. So I would say any skill set you have, finding ways to communicate that with your employers is important. And then making sure that you also, as you leverage that, are being compensated for it is important.
Listen, this entire conversation was so good. I want to know where can we stay connected, because we're gonna drop the mic on that last piece right there, because it was just so good. Like, so where can we stay connected with you, with your business? Like, how can we stay connected and be all in the sauce?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So feel free to join any of the free workshops. My company is a part of many with different organizations. We often host free workshops for working professionals as well as business owners. So you can always find out about those at csuitecoach.com. So please do check that out. And then, of course, you can always find me on the socials. So at Lena Darrisaw or at C-Suite Coach for company information as well.
I love it. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. If you do not know, you can stay connected with me everywhere at Alechia Reese. You will see the spelling right on the screen. I'm the only one with this interesting combination of names.
Beautiful.
So you will find me there. Thank you. And then stay connected with our community, gotvaluenation.com. I cannot wait to continue these types of conversations, as I know they are changing lives. And if for nobody but me, I am grateful. Have a good day, guys. Bye. Thank you for joining us on the Got Value podcast. Remember, there is true value in purpose, and the greatest discovery of your life will be exactly what yours is. Stay connected with us at gotvaluenation.com.